Hi Dragonflies, welcome back to Dragonfly Spirit Studio. I'm Lynn Bauer. This video is for those of you who have been saying to yourself, I wish I could get myself to develop a sketchbook habit, but I don't feel very confident. I'm not real happy with my sketches. Or for those of you who say, I wish I could get myself to go out and sketch outdoors, but it just seems like it takes so long to gather all the stuff, and then it's heavy and it's disorganized, and it's just kind of complicated, and you find yourself not going because it feels like just too much to have to pull everything together. Or right now, you're not going out because you're trying to stay safe and healthy, so you're kind of confined, and yet you'd like to be able to do something with your art, and you're feeling not very inspired. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a very simple version of line and wash that anyone can do. And it has this wonderful benefit that it takes even kind of wonky looking sketches and it turns them into something kind of charming with very little effort. So I hope that this will give you a tool that you can take outside if you want to sketch outside with very minimal equipment, or do inside with very minimal effort and not having to have a lot of confidence in your drawing ability and not having to have a lot of mental bandwidth right now and energy. It's something that you can do very quick and easy, very relaxing, very low stress. So let's have a look at a super simple way to sketch with water-soluble line and wash. All you need to do this type of sketching is a pen with some water-soluble ink and some sort of brush and water. So I have one of these nifty little water brushes. That's a great tool. But if you don't have that, you can just use a little cup of water and a regular brush. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have a pen with water-soluble ink, actually you probably do. This is just a typical office pen that you'd buy at Walmart or Target or an office supply store. And most of them, most of the gel pens have water-soluble ink. But you don't have to guess. You can test and find out. So I'm just going to take a scrap of watercolor paper, and this pen happens to be a fountain pen. It's a cross fountain pen, and it's got the cross ink cartridges in it, the regular black cross ink cartridge. And that ink happens to be a water-soluble ink. Most black fountain pen ink is water-soluble because it clogs less. But here's how I know for sure. I make a line, I let it have a moment to dry, and then I see if it will move on watercolor paper. If it will move, it's water-soluble. This pen actually has a waterproof ink in it. And I want to caution you that even if the ink is waterproof, if you go after it with water right away, it may move a little bit. So make sure you give it a moment to dry and then test it. See, now that it's had a little bit of time to dry, it moves even less. And once it's fully dry, it does not move at all. This is the office style gel pen. This one is a Uniball Vision Elite. So it's just a regular office gel pen. Give it a moment to dry a little bit, and you see it moves too. This doesn't move quite as much as the fountain pen ink, but it moves enough to work for this technique. One of the nice things about this version of line and wash is you don't use a lot of water, so you can do this in many sketchbooks, even if they're not intended for wet media. So this is just a regular Rhodia dot notebook like people use for bullet journaling. And even on this paper, I can make my lines, do my sketches, whatever they might be. And as long as I don't get crazy with my water, the line moves and the page doesn't ripple too badly because I didn't use very much water. But ideally, you want to work in a sketchbook that has pages that are designed to accept watercolor or wet media. And this is a Stillman and Burn beta series. Very often what happens with me is I get up in the morning and I'm tired, but I want to play in my sketchbook. And I'm sitting there having my coffee in my coffee mug, and I start sketching the mug. Now, that's not a very accurate sketch, but I still find it kind of enjoyable. And I like the way that the wash sort of gives some form to it without a lot of work. I'm going to demonstrate this technique on a little scrap of Stonehenge drawing paper, which is a heavyweight drawing paper, about the weight of watercolor paper, but it's got a surface more similar to many sketchbooks. And then I'm just going to sketch this little spray bottle that's floating around my studio. Just grab something handy in your studio. And with my water-soluble pen, I'm going to do a little sketch of my spray bottle. And I'm purposely restating my lines a lot. So there's a couple reasons for this. One is, if you are accustomed to working with pencil and you're used to erasing all the time, this is going to be your version of erasing. If you have a line that you don't like, just redraw it. The main reason why I'm doing this, restating lines, is when I come back with my water, I want plenty of ink to work with there. So instead of just drawing a very careful, little hesitant line, I'm just going to draw and redraw, which will give me lots of lines, lots of ink to work with when I come back with my brush. I'm seeing it from a little bit different angle than the photo too, so it might not be exactly what you're seeing, but that doesn't matter. What I mostly want you to notice about this is the method of drawing, where I'm allowing myself to state and restate lines repeatedly. That's a good thing, both because it allows me to record a little more accurately, and more importantly because it gives me plenty of ink to work with when I get to this next stage. All right, once I have my little drawing done, I'm going to come back with my brush, and I'm looking for places where there are shadows. And what I'll do is I'll put the brush down next to the line that I want a shadow on, and I'll let that water pull some of the ink away from the line to make my shadow shape. I can go right across a line, so sometimes you get those circular reflections or refractions. That helps create that sense of shape. I can pull away from the line into the object. So I'm looking for places where there might be a shadow, and I'm just letting the water pull those shadow shapes out and help me create the illusion of form. Now, I don't have to confine myself to just working inside the object. I can also create shadows that go to the outside. So there are some shadows behind this little bottle from my studio lights that go off, or from my video lights that go off in a couple directions behind. So I could pull some color away to create those little shadows that go off behind. I can create shadows that show the roundness of things, like that. But one thing you want to avoid is you don't want to go over every single line. If I just come along and put the tip of my brush on a line and sort of go along that line, all I wind up with is a fat line. If I go over every line in here and pull color out from all of the lines, then what I'll have is just sort of a mushy drawing. So I want to pull out a few shadows, but I don't want to go crazy on every single line. So just as with all watercolor, a little restraint is a good thing. Now you can also create the sense of maybe a darker background, but you see, if I'm trying to create a darker background here, I only get a little bit of color, and that really doesn't help me. It almost looks like, I don't know, there's something exploding off of there. It doesn't really look like a dark background. So if I want some color and I don't get enough from my line, what I can do is take my pen and sweep a little color off my pen using my water brush or your regular brush. And to blend that color, it helps if you put some water down first and then pull off the color from your pen. So I'll wet that area first and then pull the color off my pen and drop it into that water. So that's a way I can create the sense of some shadowing or a darker background behind the upper part of that bottle. Now, isn't that charming? It's much more charming to me than just the sketch by itself. And it has some of the quality of a watercolor, even though all I needed for this sketch is my water-soluble ink, a brush with some water, a towel to blot things, and either a sketchbook or a watercolor postcard or a little scrap of heavyweight paper. So all of this is easy to tuck in your pocket or tuck in a backpack and take with you wherever you go and be able to sketch. But we can sketch scenes that are a little more complicated than just a little bottle in your studio. So let's suppose I'm here on the beach looking at this scene. One thing that you want to do when you do this is simplify. Don't try to do every single thing you see. Focus in on the main shapes. And I know that that's a tall order. It's hard. That's one of the hardest things that we have to do as artists is learn to simplify. But I'm going to put in my horizon line. Obviously, this big rock is one of the main subjects that draws your attention here. And I'm doing a little extra scribbling inside this rock because I know I want to make it nice and dark. Then I have some waves. I'm just going to scribble some shapes for those. There are some rocks here in the foreground. There's a little more here. And then there's this sandstone cliff and dune with all these trees on it. So you see I'm just doing my scribbling thing where all that dark stuff is. Working fast, working really loose, trying to just get the sense of it. I don't have to always be doing something that looks exactly like a photograph. If I want a photograph, just take a photograph. And let's see, we got this little guy walking in here. Now, I'm going to avoid putting the person in just yet, because if I put the person in, it will be hard for me to make some of the sweeps of color that I'd like to make down through here. So what I'm going to do is leave that person out for now and add them after this is dry. And now I have the question of what about the clouds? And I don't think I want to try to draw those clouds. So let's start with just this much. I've drawn the main landforms. And now I'm going to look at what's happening in the water. It's mostly some horizontal sorts of patterns of movement. So if I just lightly sweep my brush over these areas, then I can get that suggestion of light and dark in the water. The rock is plenty dark, so we'll just kind of draw all the color in. And I kind of like those few little lights there, so I'm going to leave them. looking for shadow shapes. Trying to create the suggestion of the shadows. And I like to leave these little lights. That gives it a little bit more life. And then we have these dark trees up here. And what I'll do for that is I've got these scribbles, and I'm just kind of touching the brush over and over again so that some light will stay along those edges. Instead of having it be one big blob, I want a little light to come through the upper part of those trees. So I'm just kind of bouncing my brush up and down. Now for the clouds, let's turn this upside down so we can work more easily. Just above the horizon, there is sort of a suggestion of some haze or fog or a little bit of cloud right above the horizon. So let's pull that out. Some kind of negative painting there. And then I want to create a suggestion of some of these clouds up here. So to do that, I think what I will do is I'm going to scribble with my brush to create those sort of rounded shapes. And then I'm going to get a little bit of color from my pen onto my brush and kind of sweep it in cloud shapes. I'm not going to try, it's too much to ask for this technique to try to reproduce an exact replica of this sky. What I'm going to try to do instead is give some cloud shapes to this sky. So I'm looking at the shadow shapes in these clouds. I haven't looked at the top edge yet. We won't worry about that just yet. So again, I'm going to wet the area where these clouds are going to go and create some of the sorts of shapes I see on the undersides of these clouds or in the shadow areas of these clouds. That one's darker than I intended. So let's spread it out some. All right, then we have this big sort of anvil-shaped cloud back here. And then we'll do the same sort of thing. Now I'm ignoring the shadow shapes in the clouds. I'm looking at the blue, and I'm going to put color where there is blue and sort of create the upper edge of those clouds. So this would be blue sky and sort of the upper edges of the clouds. Magic, isn't it? I forgot to wet that area first, and when you do that, the color doesn't move as well. The ink doesn't move as well, so that's how come I got that little dark patch there. There we go. So now we have a suggestion of a cloudy sky behind, and we might want our sand in the foreground. So I think I'll do that the same way. I'm going to wet an area and kind of pick up a little color off of my pen and sweep it in. And I think that's probably enough to suggest that there's a little bit of a shadow shape in the sand. Now, where I want to put my person is right in here, and I've got to make sure that's dry. And fortunately, I managed to keep this whole area dry. If it's not dry, I have to wait, because if I touch this down, if I have a wet area on the page and I start drawing in it, my ink is going to run, which effect I could use, but I don't want my person to run all over the place. So I make sure I have dry paper where I'm going to put my figure in, and then I'm just going to kind of scribble him in. Little head, little body, little leg and foot, little leg and foot. I'm not being too super accurate. Little hand and a little. Now, if I want, I can create a shadow for my person. I can come in here and just drag a little color so the person has a shadow. If I want to, I can emphasize a bit more of the water in close to that person, which I didn't want to do earlier because I didn't want to get that area wet. Now, isn't that charming? To me, that's just so super simple, because all I need are these few things and a cloth to blot my brush, which I forgot to mention earlier, but you probably saw me doing that. Sometimes you want to be able to dry your brush a little bit. And I can produce this very lively little sketch that captures a lot of the light and so forth in the day, even though it doesn't reproduce it accurately in terms of photographically. So there you have it. The most minimalist, lowest stress way I know of producing a sketch that has a lot of the look of a watercolor and allows you to practice some of your watercolor techniques and practice your sketching, and sort of magically makes even a fairly rough sketch look really charming and unusual. So I hope you'll give it a try and have a good time with it, and I'll see you next time. Happy painting!